Welcome to the second episode of Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. We're back again. We're going to be talking about several issues, the one being the corona issue. It's absolutely shattered the world. It's shattered the boxing world, particularly a sport that we love. And a lot of people from all levels of the sport are suffering. So let me welcome the three gentlemen. Devin Curra, SA Boxing Buzz. Ring announcer too. Cyril Hong, boxing journalist, man about town, the 10 counts, and Hayden Jones, what can we say, SA Boxing Talk. Gentlemen, we're going to open it up, and Cyril, I'm going to start with you. Besides the fact that we mentioned in the first episode that we're all very bored, what is your opinion on how this will affect South African boxing? Let me start that question with you first.
I think the biggest concern will be when it comes to sponsorship for tournaments and boxers. Businesses who are sponsoring, will they still have money to fund these boxers once this is all over? What happens to your new fighters, your 4-round fighters, your smaller promoters? Will they survive this? It's going to be interesting, and how they raise money also. I think that's the biggest thing. With the economy is going to suffer, so how the whole thing's going to work out.
So you mentioned such a good point about sponsorship for fighters. I want to go deeper than that. What about the small businesses that fund fighters on a retainer each month? Those small businesses are going to be impacted greatly because of the corona issue. And they might not be able to keep funding these fighters on a monthly retainer. Hayden, let me ask you, how do you think it affects those kind of fighters?
Yeah, of course. You think about who actually sponsors the fighters. It's the small businesses. Let's face it. Rarely do they get corporate sponsors, and if they do, they're usually well off in that fact. Monthly, boxers going to suffer, but everyone's going to suffer, not just boxers. This pandemic is causing people problems. I know this is about boxing, but unfortunately, for the first couple of months, sort of as we get a clean slate to all start again, it's going to be very tough for the guys to come out of this.
Devin, people are talking about scheduling. I was speaking to some guys overseas. They said nothing before October. Some people are saying June. Some people are saying July. Remember, when we get the green lights, we can't just schedule a fight 2 weeks later. Fighters have to get back into the gym. They have to train. When do you think when do you think boxing will be able to resume? And I'm not saying in normality, because it's going to take a long time for boxing to be stabilized. But in your opinion, when do you think we can start resuming boxing again?
Well, I think it comes down to what your version of normality is. From a business perspective, outside of boxing, the people are saying normality might take up to 1.5 years to achieve what we are prior to the lockdown. But the thing is that the whole world is going into lockdowns at different phases of time. So say, for instance, our lockdown is successful and we're let out in 13 days time, as it is today. I think I read on News 24. Then what happens? Are you able to put on a boxing show, say 6 weeks later, to allow the guys time to train, and then have opponents fly into the country? Will our borders still be closed down? Will their borders still be closed down? So I think what might happen, and I think the only logical thing that can really be done, is we might have to have a lot of South African versus South African fights, because they can be made within our country. But this all is on the perfect whim that in 13 days we get let out of our houses, which isn't a guarantee, because what happens if the virus comes back?
And Cyril, that's the next issue that I wanted to speak to you about, and Devin touched on that. So our borders are open and we can travel, but let's just say we want to do a fight between a South African and a Filipino. Their borders will be closed up until maybe 4 weeks afterwards. How do you put on an international fight then? Do you wait until the world, in terms of everyone just getting together and saying, okay, look, we can put on events, we can put on sporting events. Some events are being pushed back now till next year. How do we deal with that? And going back to what Devin said, I like the idea of a South African title fight, but guys want international fights. They want to fight for world titles. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's going to be a long time before we start seeing international fights, if you're to be honest. I just don't see it happening, because as Devin mentioned, we're all going to these lockdowns at different stages. some countries the pandemic's worse than others. So it's gonna be a while before we can actually see we can see guys crossing borders or going to different countries to fight.
Hayden, with Olympics being cancelled, I just got an email from the IBF. The IBF convention is now being shifted till next year. Are you surprised that these events are now being cancelled?
No, of course. I mean, if you think about the topic that we've just been discussing now, with the international everywhere being closed, it's a no-brainer to just schedule until next year. To schedule something for August, September would be ludicrous. I mean, imagine this virus, as Devin says, keeps going and going, and we don't actually stop this lockdown. I mean, you can't. Then you got to postpone a postponement, and it's just like, rather be safe than sorry. And with big events like that, the Olympics, which you were talking about, the Euro Games for the football, all those big tournaments can shift. You see, the events like boxing, we can still say, okay, we can do it because there's actually no set period of time that boxing needs to take place. It can go all year round. There are 365 days, which is convenient for us in that way.
There's also been a theory that fighters' paychecks might drop by 20 or 30% due to the situation of the coronavirus. Devin, and this actually might be a factor globally, not just locally. What's your opinion on fighters potentially earning less than what they earned previously?
Well, I think it's a very real prospect that fighters are going to have to kind of accept and expect a lot less than what they might have been earning. And this is mainly because the form of boxing promotion in South Africa, unfortunately, falls upon those going cap in hand to government, relying on money from the sport and recreation departments of the government coffers. After the mop-up, I don't know how much money is going to be left in the till for us to be able to give to, especially to sports like boxing, because, they were getting a couple of million rand from government per show. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of money that is going to be needed by the states to reform hospitals, to give money to workers who are out of employment that are not involved in boxing. So the problem is that with like you said, the smaller sponsors drying up, I think that there's going to be some very slim pickings, not only for fighters, but for anybody who wants to be a promoter in South Africa as well. A lot of the promoters could find themselves not even promoting anymore. And this is it's scary.
Hayden, you and I were at a press conference recently where there was an announcement saying the budgets in sports are going to be cut. Do you think this is all doom and gloom for boxing though, here in South Africa?
No, it's never doom and gloom. I mean, this also gives opportunities to sort of new promoters that want to come through, people that have never actually dipped their toes into such industries. But it is kind of sad that the current events that we were going to see, and it happened at a time when there were so many things happening in boxing. Because remember, like we really start slow in South Africa in boxing, and all of a sudden these events came through, and it's like coronavirus, pandemic lockdown. And it's like, we didn't get to watch all those shows. Heki Butler was going to fight. Sulani Mbenge was going to fight. We had all those big fights. We had that other tournaments as well.
I think it was Fuzili, Luduma, Lamati. I mean, it was pretty stacked.
All the big fights. And like literally, it's like start from scratch again. Will those matchups be made again? We don't even know.
Cyril, there's a saying in business that goes, there's always money. You just have to go out and find it. Do you think the same will apply for South African boxing?
Definitely. I think it's an opportunity in a way, because previously you had a situation where promoters could just get money from government, and they didn't have to market the sport so much because they were getting money anyway. So now maybe without government funding, you'll have a situation where promoters are forced to have to market the sport and to get that sponsorship from businesses, which can only be a good thing for the sport, So it's not all doom and gloom the way I see it. It's an opportunity.
Devin, with Las Vegas shutting down literally all the casinos, do you think those fighters, with the bigger promoters in America, let's just say, are going to suffer to a point in terms of also having a pay cut?
I think the marquee fighters on dollar terms are probably not going to suffer as much as South African promoter type fighters or anywhere else in the world, because obviously the dollar still being the dollar that it is. I don't think it's going to depreciate too much in value. And when Vegas kicks back up, there's always been a saying, the things in economic downturn that always turn a profit is hookers and gambling.
Yeah, here's another factor to consider, guys.
Vegas has both of those things and a lot of it.
Okay, well, you can send us a postcard and let us know how that works out for you. Hayden, there's something else we need to consider as well, is that the Rand has slumped close to 18 Rand now. Now, after the virus, I'm almost convinced and sure that the Rand will strengthen, but to what point? And here's the other factor to consider with us going through this economic crisis. Will we be able to afford a $7,500, $10,000 fighter like some of the promoters around the country have been? It's going to be a lot of money. And that's another factor to consider. We've always heard that the Rand dollar is an excuse and it's a problem, but now it really is a problem. How do you think we'll deal with that?
Well, if you look at South Africa, we bring in a lot of Filipinos, a lot of Mexicans. We're already saving money on a lot of these bills in our promotions. We never ever dip our toes into USA, UK, because those markets are unachievable for us at the moment. And if you look at us, we're always bringing in Tanzanians. I don't think nothing's going to nothing will change with regards to that. The Rand is probably stronger than a lot of the other African countries, so maybe bringing in those guys might actually work out a little bit cheaper.
And I suppose, Cyril, if we're going through this economic crisis, the rest of the world is too. So, working out with those fighters in those countries shouldn't really be too much of a problem.
I don't think it should be too much of a problem. And let's not forget, your local derbies do create a lot of buzz in the country. So, having a lot of South Africans against South Africans, obviously there's a certain level that once a fight has gone past that level, it can't actually be matched locally anymore. But for those they can still be matched locally. It's not a bad thing to be matched against South Africans. So, yeah.
Guys, let's talk about fights that potentially should or could happen. One that was going to happen that is now on ice is Lomachenko versus Lopez. So, actually, let me start with you, because when Lopez knocked out Richard Commey, you said beforehand that you thought it was maybe a little bit too soon for Lopez. What are your thoughts on that fight now, knowing that Lopez can really crack with the right hand and he absolutely took Richard Commey apart?
Look, Lopez proved me wrong and he surprised me. He's a real talent. I think Lomachenko dominates him, though. Lomachenko is just another level. But Lomachenko can get caught, and we've seen him get caught. And if Lopez catches him, it could be over.
Devin, your opinion on that fight?
Well, when you consider that a guy who put him on his backside not even too long ago with a straight right hand, and that's being Jorge Linares, which at the time there's probably been an argument about Jorge Linares being shot for the last, say, 4 or 5 years as a fighter, who was able to find that one-punch equalizer and stick Lomachenko on his backside with the right hand. This is something that Lopez has got as his Sunday punch. He's a big right-handed fighter. He throws that right hand with vengeance, and Commey obviously found out the hard way. So when you think to yourself, okay, fine, Linares was over the hill. I mean, you and I have been saying that he's probably been over the hill since the Antonio DeMarco fight, which was, almost a decade ago. He managed to push the button, and he managed to put Lomachenko down. What's going to happen with a younger, hungrier fighter in Teofimo Lopez? I think, Lomachenko's time could be winding down on a very long and illustrious career.
This is where I'm going to come in from a trainer's perspective, is that Linares throws the right hand in a very straight position, where Lopez likes to throw the right hand in a very curved overhand right position. And I think, although you can say that he is open to the right hand, there's different techniques and levels and degrees of which he throws the right hand. So that's also a factor to consider. I think Lopez probably punches harder with the right hand than Linares does. And also up until that point, it was a very, very close fight. So Devin, I think your comments are warranted, and for me, Linares in his prime was probably one of the most balanced fighters I've ever seen in my career. Beautiful to watch.
One of my favorites.
I watched him train out the Tekken gym in December. even now catching mitts with him, well, not me, watching his brother catch mitts for him was breathtaking. The balance is still there. He's obviously not the same fighter he was. But Hayden, your after what I've just said in terms of positioning of the right hand, with Linares throwing in a straight position and Lopez curbing it, what's your opinion? Do you think Lomachenko, being the most incredible boxing technician in the world right now, do you think he'll make that adjustment?
Look, I think Lomachenko is just he's a special fighter, as you said, but I want to take a whole different approach to this. I want to look at the mental aspects of things. If you look at Teofimo Lopez, he obviously, he's in his personal life, he's been struggling a little bit with with family disagreements and so forth. His last fight, he did come out really good, but it was an early knockout. You got to realize that as well. So if that fight had gone on, we don't know what would have happened. Teofimo Lopez is undefeated. But again, Lomachenko is one of the most strong mental fighters you're ever going to find. That guy is not going to, it's a central block. Those guys, once they get in the zone, they get in the zone. So if that fight goes deep, it'll be interesting to see how Lopez comes out of it. Or alternatively, has he dealt with his problems behind the scenes?
So a very, very important factor to consider is Joey Gamashi trains Lopez. But Gamashi was in Lomachenko's corner when he had his first loss. In his second fight against Salido. Do you think that could be a mental edge for Lopez, knowing that his trainer is well accustomed to Lomachenko and he's been around them and he knows what kind of fighter he's going up against? Do you think that could play a factor too?
I think it could, but it'd be a small factor. If you think about it, Lomachenko is not quite the same fighter he was against Salido. I mean, he was still very new in the pro ranks when he fought Salido, and he was basically learning the whole pro game. And I mean, fighting against a guy like Salido in your second pro fight, that's huge. And I don't think so. I don't think he's a much better fighter than he was then. But then,
Devin, you wanted to add? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, like, my memory of the Linares Lomachenko fight. I mean, I know it was 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. How long ago was that?
2018.
Okay, so Lomachenko got caught quite late, if I remember correctly, like around about the 10th.
Round 10. Yeah, I believe it was round 10.
And he got caught because of what he was doing. He was standing in front of the guy thinking that he was basically marching off to victory, right?
Correct.
So he's got that, you say he's disciplined, he's got that Eastern Bloc mentality about him, but late in a fight when he thinks he's marching off to victory, he still makes those massive kind of mistakes. And getting caught the way he did, he was basically a stationary target for just 1 second. And this is just 1 second against the guy who supposedly is not the fighter that he used to be. So, I tend to wonder, is Lomachenko's clock starting to tick down? Crawler lit him up. He is faced after that Crawler fight. In fact, Lomachenko's faced after many of his fights have been requiring stitches. He gets hit. So I tend to wonder, is Lomachenko everything that everyone is saying he is? Or is because he had such a long amateur career into such a very late blooming pro career, he's now over the age of 30. Do you think that it's now caught up with him and he's not the kind of guy that he used to be, say, maybe in his 4th or 5th pro fight?
Yeah, Devin, I think you were talking about Lomachenko versus Campbell, not against
Campbell.
Crawler.
Sorry, not Crawler,
yeah. Crawler, he absolutely destroyed. Guys, you know what? I think it's a young, hungry lion against an established, unbelievable talent. And I think, for me, I've got to go with a little bit more of the experienced guy. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if Lopez can catch Lomachenko and put him on his backside and maybe cause a stoppage. I'd be surprised. So having said that, I'm going to go with the more established guy, and I'm going to go with Lomachenko. Probably on points, I think Lopez is a strong, tough kid. I think he's going to hang in there, maybe even have a late round stoppage, but I think Lomachenko might be just a little bit too polished for him at this stage of their respective careers. Guys, I want to move on to the next one. Jose Ramirez, junior welterweight champion of the world. Josh Taylor, the junior welterweight champion of the world. that fight is inevitably going to happen down the line. And Cyril, let me start with you. These guys are amazing talents, amazing fighters. Who's your pick and why?
You know, the junior welterweight division doesn't get as much credit as it should. Sure, it's actually a tough one to call. I like Josh Taylor. I think he's proven himself. He's had, I think, going through the World Boxing Super Series, he established himself as the better guy. So I'd lean towards him on points.
Hayden, Josh Taylor's obviously got a new trainer in Ben Davison. What kind of factors do you think that'll play? I mean, he's obviously expected to fight now. He's mandatory first, and then obviously the guy's on a collision course. You can actually see it. You can see what's going on. Do you think Ben Davison will add something more to Taylor, or do you think we'll still see the same kind of Taylor?
You know, it's hard to say with Ben Davison because, I mean, even if you look at Tyson Fury and that whole combination, did Tyson Fury look better after he left Ben Davison, or was he better with him? You know, and in saying that as well, Josh Taylor, he kind of was forced into this move. It wasn't a choice. I mean, the McGuigan camp was his preferred choice before, obviously, a change of promotion. So will he be better? I can't say guaranteed if he will be better.
Who's your choice for that fight if and when it happens?
You know what? I think it's going to be Josh Taylor that wins this fight, and maybe we're going to get, because like Ramirez has got like a bit of Oscar De La Hoya style. I think Josh Taylor is likely to be like more like Sweet Pea. So could we be seeing like with the defensive abilities and so forth? So that makes for an interesting sort of battle. Let's put it that way.
Dev, your opinion on that fight when it happens?
Okay, so I remember the first time I ever heard about Josh Taylor was when you took Warren Jabeur off to Scotland to go and fight him. And when he beat Warren Jabeur, you said to me that this is no massive crushing loss because Josh Taylor is destined to be a world champion. I didn't watch that fight. I was high on Regis Prograis. I was so high on Regis Prograis that I thought that Regis was going to walk in there, smash Josh Taylor, and I would get to say for the first time in my life to Colin Nathan that I told you so. But it didn't happen that way. And Regis Prograis was, and still is, as quality a world champion as you can get. And although it was a very close fight, one of the Fight of the Year contenders, Josh Taylor fairly won it. Josh Taylor's problem, though, what I read in the press, is that he likes a jaw a little bit more than most people that in his category of superstar athlete should be liking a jaw. So Ben Davison as his choice of trainer was a massive shock to me. I thought there were maybe 3 or 4 other guys in the UK that he might join ahead of Ben Davison. I'm not certain and sold on Ben Davison as a trainer. I'm not certain and sold on Josh Taylor's ability to straighten out his life because I just hear the rumblings. I read the reports. Weird things are happening with Colombian powders and whatnot. Although with a guy like Jose Ramirez, Josh Taylor on his best day should have enough in the tank to beat him.
My opinion is I've always been high on Josh Taylor. I think he's, besides obviously being an amazing human being, a personal friend of mine too, MTK fighter, so Viva MTK. I just think he's got something special, and I thought so after he beat Warren. And I knew going into that fight with Warren that we were up against a world-class operator. I just think he's just smooth, classy. I think he's getting better and better. Irrespective of what reports you've read, Devin, I can tell you quite honestly, and I've seen it, and I follow him. When he buckles down for training, my Lord, he's something special. He's a machine. He just does not stop. He's hungry for success. I see he's just bought a new house. He's a very together human being, which I like. I like that as a factor in terms of a fighter, obviously progressing to become the ultimate fighter, and that's becoming the undisputed champion. I just think he's special, and I think the Scottish fans love him, and I would go back just to hear those Scottish fans roar his name and surname again. It's going to be interesting to see how everyone regroups after the COVID-19 scenario. But obviously, I got a special place in my heart for Josh Taylor. Guys, the last fight that we're going to talk about, and as it stands right now, I think this is more fantasy. Also, it's close to my heart. Tyson Fury, the lineal and WBC heavyweight champion of the world, and the two-time heavyweight champion of the world, and current heavyweight champion is Anthony Joshua. So the fantasy fight,
Why is this fantasy?
Because you got two promoters right now who either do or don't like each other. But for me, I think inevitably this fight has to happen because there's just so much money on the line. This would probably be the biggest UK fight in the history of UK boxing. And to me, I'm going to open up and say this. Fury, again, being an MTK man, and I've said this before, and I'm not going to bullshit anyone. I think Fury's style, purely on his style, he beats Joshua. Joshua is a little bit mechanical, very one-dimensional in certain positions, and I just think the natural flow and natural ability that Fury possesses, which not a lot of people give him enough credit for. You know, he's defensively, he's good. He's got a good chin. He's got a great ring generalship. And I think he's just going to be too much. I think he'll be a pain in the ass for Anthony Joshua. And I see him outboxing him, even stopping him late. Devin.
6'9" and how many hundreds of kilos? You're always going to be trouble for anybody that you're fighting. Doesn't matter how skilled you might be. And, you know, when you consider that when he beat Klitschko in Germany, what did he do? He leans on a guy. He takes your strength away. He's sapping you the whole time. He's pulling wrestling moves. He's pulling your arm around the back. He's swinging you around. He's pushing you onto the ropes, and he's hanging on to you. I think that the drain of that is easy to take somebody's legs away after 3 or 4 rounds. And that's what he did to Deontay Wilder. That whole suit story, I don't believe. It's absolute bullshit because Deontay Wilder said that he trains with 40-pound suits on all the time. So you can't give me that. But when you look at what Tyson Fury did, is he took that guy's legs away. And I think he does the same thing to Anthony Joshua.
Cyril, your opinion on that fight, who wins and why?
I'm going to go with Devin. I think Tyson Fury wins it. I think Tyson Fury is just too smart for any heavyweight at the moment. I think he possibly stops Joshua probably the later rounds. I just think he's just too. There's no one that can actually match him right now in that division.
And in your opinion, we all three of us so far have said Fury. I know you might be a bit divided. Who's your pick and why?
Yeah, no, it is Tyson Fury as of right now. Again, well, let's see, because I've always liked Anthony Joshua. Before, if you had asked me this before he had lost to Andy Ruiz Jr., my opinion might have been a little bit different. But now, in retrospect, after the Deontay Wilder results with Tyson Fury, you can see that he's capable of being a nightmare for absolutely every single heavyweight in the world. Just his boxing style, the fact that he moves around and ships the way he does, it's as Devin was saying, he's leaning on people. It's going to take something really special to dethrone him, and it could be an unmotivated Tyson Fury that actually is the enemy to himself, as opposed to a guy who's coming through. I mean, look at his fights against Otto Warlin. These were not particularly special fights. These were fights that he didn't really get up for. So it's going to take a sort of an uninspired performance on his behalf for him to lose. So, and I do feel he would be up for an Anthony Joshua fight, the magnitude of it. Again, Joshua not really convincing as of late. So, yeah, Tyson Fury.
Think of it this way, though. Years ago, when Tyson Fury got put over by Steve Cunningham, when he punched himself in the face with an uppercut, did you ever think, if I told you we would be having this conversation today, how crazy would you call me?
No, look, I mean, I think technically in the beginning, Tyson was just all over the place. But what he did well was used all those, the unorthodoxness of his style to win in fights. And that's why, like, sometimes he's just really hard to beat, guys. Even to try and outbox him, it's really, really difficult. Gentlemen, I'm just one last parting shot. Devin, let me start with you.
As far as a parting shot is concerned, I really hope that we get to see the fights that we've been talking about materialize soon. Reality is that it might not, but for the here and now, the four of us can get together and have these chats and pray for everyone involved that everyone's going to get through this time, that we have no boxing, limited incomes, and nothing really to look forward to. Let's hope that it ends soon.
Cyril, your last parting shot.
Yeah, these fights, obviously as a fight fan, I hope for these fights to happen, and everybody just stay strong, and let's hope the end of this pandemic is sooner rather than later.
Hayden, you?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that a lot of the other countries are taking it seriously, like South Africa with the lockdowns and so forth. I mean, that's just how it's going to happen. We need to keep inside our homes. We need to block air travel until this is all done, and then hopefully boxing resumes. And hopefully with these fantasy fights, that would be a big bonus. And maybe not this year, or maybe we'll get some of them towards the end of this year, but most definitely early next year.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure being in your company. This is the second episode of The Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. Remember, guys, please stay safe, and we love you, and we'll see you soon.